Hey folks, today's episode is brought to you by IG Publishing, publisher of Lord, the One You Love is Sick. It's a debut novel in stories by Casey Thornton. Lord, the One You Love is Sick is a gorgeously written and heartrending work of fiction from an important new voice in the literature of the American South. Publishers Weekly raves, quote, "These stories collectively coalesce into a resonant, emotionally searing nexus of hard truths, buried secrets, and emotional pain that readers won't soon forget. Lord, the One You Love is Sick by Casey Thornton. Available now from IG Publishing."
I just lost like 7 aunts and 6 uncles. I shouldn't be here. I need to be in the vast oceanic prairie. You spin fast enough, you can help the.
Hey folks, how are you? Welcome to the Otherppl Show. My name's Brad Listi. I'm in Los Angeles, and it's nice to be with you. This episode goes live on November 4th, 2020. I am recording this on November 3rd. It is 3:42 p.m. in the afternoon in Los Angeles, California on November 3rd, Election Day 2020. As I say these words, I don't know who won the election. By the time you're listening to this, maybe we do. It's a strange time to be alive. It's been a strange day. I feel like I'm in some sort of like narco haze. I'm not on anything. I don't take Xanax or anything like that. I feel a little tired, to be honest. I'm just ready for it to be over. I want to know what's going to happen. I feel like Biden is going to win. I didn't feel 100% that Hillary Clinton was going to win in 2016. I mean, the numbers were saying, I don't know. You know what I mean. But I'm choosing to be optimistic. So that's where I'm at right now, just so you know. I need to mark this moment. But I won't carry on, because by the time you hear it, you know, it's going to be settled, I would imagine. Sebastian Castillo is my guest today. He has a book out on Word West Press. It is called Not I. It's a hybrid work of literature. Is it autobiography? Is it poetry? Is it fiction? Is it all of the above? You be the judge. I had a great time talking with Sebastian, and I'm going to share that conversation with you right now. Here he is, folks. This is Sebastian Castillo, and his new book, once again, is called Not I.
I started it like 3 years ago, and at the time I was like teaching a lot. I was teaching like 5 classes at different schools, and I don't think it was like it consciously came out of, you know, teaching so much composition, but looking back on it, it must have motivated it somehow, you know, like looking at the sort of essential stuff of language every day and correcting these sort of small things. But yeah, in terms of the limitations too, it's like I remember when I first started, I kind of wanted a distraction. You know, I was working on short stories and I was just kind of getting tired of it. And I wanted something with like really rigid rules. And in some ways that actually became way more fun to write.
Sometimes I feel like I think constraints in general are good for art.
Yeah, I'm really influenced by the Otherppl writers. I never know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. They're mostly French, and I think Otherppl is an acronym for I don't remember exactly what, but it's basically, you know, all procedural, all constraint-based writing. I would say George Perec is probably the most famous of the group. He he wrote a whole novel without the letter E, like some really wild stuff like that. It really spoke to me.
Damn, I'm trying to think of even like what you would. That must be the most tedious kind of writing ever, trying to avoid the letter E.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting too is that it's the most common letter in French, and he originally wrote it in the French, and then it's also I think the most common letter in English, and so his translator pretty much had as much of a task at hand when he translated the book because he also had to avoid the letter E.
All right. That's it. You better get paid extra for that.
I know, right?
So I was thinking of Edouard Levé too. Just the declarative, autobiographical, personal. Though I feel like your book is a little bit more elliptical in some ways than his. Yours is a little bit more poetic. Like his feels like confessional. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember when I first read that book, Autoportrait, years ago. It was like totally blew me away. And I really loved how, as you said, it's kind of these declarative sentences. And you would think that, they're kind of neutral in quality, right, emotionally, but it has a bit of like a cumulative effect where, halfway through you're like, why is this book so depressing? But yeah, in terms of difference, I would definitely say that it seems like his has a much more of a confessional bent, and I, in some ways, I guess, was trying to like write against that. There are things that are reflective of things that I believe or ways that I behave, but there are a lot of things that aren't. I guess that are closer to lies than not. So there is definitely, an anti-confessionalism at play there.
Well, and I also think that there is. I'm trying to think of how to describe it, but I feel like the lines in your book, the reader can fit inside of them, whereas with Levé, it's very much him, and it's his life and his experience. And your book's, the way that it's composed, I feel like, I don't know, I could feel like a level of access to each line that was personal to me. Yeah,
definitely. There were. Well, one of the things that I was thinking about when I was writing it was I wanted there to be a mix of sentences that were totally like quotidian, like I go to the park, like something that anyone could say. And then, clashing against that, things that were utterances that were a little bit more like idiosyncratic, strange, especially later on in the book where you get to more, convoluted sentences due to the tenses, kind of playing against that.
Okay, so how do you categorize this book? Do you categorize it? Because it is one of those works that resists easy classification. Is it poetry? Is it autobiography? What is it?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I've always been interested in moving in between forms, and kind of assimilating a lot of different qualities of different genres. What I found interesting is I did an interview for Hobart, and Nick, the person who interviewed it, said he called it a novel, and he called the person speaking the narrator of the novel, which I found very funny because I never considered it a novel, but I also don't really know. It could be poetry. I think there are similarities to things like I Remember by Joe Brainerd, which is kind of a book of poetry, also kind of not. I'm not sure. I feel like it exists, somewhere in between those places, and that's I like that. I like that it has that ambiguity.
I've been thinking lately about a category of book that is just called book. Like, we don't have to call it a novel. We don't have to call it poet. Like, it's just a book. I don't know. Call it whatever you want to call it. Like, does that impulse resonate with you?
Yeah, that reminds me. I was once teaching a creative writing class, and I showed my students one of Dennis Cooper's GIF novels. I don't know if you've ever seen them, where it's just a collection of GIFs. Like, you just scroll through all these GIFs, and he calls them a novel. And so I showed them to the class, and I think it was like a class of freshmen. And one student, I was like, "So, what do you think? Like, is this a novel? Can we think of this as a novel?" And one student said, like, "Who cares? It's just cool. Like, that's all that matters to me," which I thought was really funny.
I've had arguments with people, or not arguments, but I've like decided unilaterally that if Andy Warhol were alive today, the GIF would be his like preferred medium. Like,
I could definitely see that. Absolutely.
Like, they feel, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think GIFs are really, really interesting and amusing. I think it's, I don't know. I think there's something to that. And I know Dennis Cooper's work. I've had him on the show before. I have not seen the GIF novel, but I feel like that's exactly the kind of thing he would be doing. And somebody's got to be working in this space. You know, it's kind of on the outer reaches. I guess it would be called avant-garde. Is that, I mean, that seems like the space you live in. Is that how you conceive of yourself in your own work? Are you like really, do you define yourself as an experimental writer? Is that your area of interest, to try to find new forms or to work in hybrid forms?
Yeah, I mean, maybe by accident, but I do think that it's hard for me to sort of sit down and just say like, all right, I'm going to write a story about some, I don't know, some difficult emotional period of my life or whatever. I just get so bored of it so quickly. That never really animates the writing. For me, it's a lot of like formal play and thinking about tradition in the writers that I like. That's always the stuff that I am the most excited by. And I think, in general, I'm sure this is true for a lot of people, but I feel like, I only started writing because I liked reading so much. Like I felt like writing was a continuation of my reading. And so because the things I read tend to be in that world, the things I write follow suit.
So you don't, like, when you talk about writing about, from a place of personal anguish or some difficult period, what bores you about it?
I don't know. It's because I feel like inevitably that type of stuff does come up, like it doesn't matter how, or at the very least, like the experimental work, if we want to call it that I love, isn't like a totally, conceptual exercise. It's not just to do something strange. There always has to be something a bit more, I don't know, a bit more human in it. And so that material, those emotions, I feel like those things always crop up regardless of the form you're working in. But I think that in terms of straightforward kinds of, if we want to say like confessional writing, a part of me feels like, there's so many books in the world, and a kind of guilt that I've always felt as a writer is like, should I put another thing in the world, regardless of if anybody reads it or not? Like, it feels like there's this gigantic heap, this like garbage pile of human art and existence, and to do something that's like, I don't know, so repeatable feels excessive. Like I feel like.
But wouldn't it be if it was your specific experience, your personal experience? How is that repeatable?
You're totally right. I think like this is definitely like a personal hang up, because even with super experimental work, it's always coming from a certain tradition of writers and artists who've already done stuff like that. And so I guess I think of it as it's like you want to enter a house through a particular entry point, like to me, like walking into, it's like maybe like a pretentious metaphor, but like walking into the house of literature or art or whatever, through the perspective of writing, the way that I was talking about before, like traditional confessional stuff seems like it's just not as interesting. Like, I want to enter that world from a different perspective, but it's I guess it's a satisfying explanation to myself, but maybe not to other people.
Do you feel like the experimental stuff is emotionally easier? Like to go in straightforward is just too emotionally uncomfortable, or is that not a factor?
I think that's a really that's a really good way to put it. I've never really thought about it like that before. I think also too, it's like I don't know. I guess I was sort of talking about it before, but like I don't know if a nerve or an emotion is the primary thing that drives my wanting to write something. It's always a kind of echo off something else. Usually something that I something that I've read, something that I admire, and wanting to sort of like reshape it or play with it in my own way. And I feel like in the past when I've taught creative writing, I've told students like, the best way to get better, just copy somebody you like. Just copy a writer you like, and it's not going to be as good, but you keep doing that over and over again to different writers, and then eventually you're going to find yourself doing something that's exciting to you. So yeah, I guess in terms of the question of emotion, it's like it's just that's never the place where I start personally.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that we learn through mimicry or copying, like you're saying. Like it's kind of one of these things that can be easy to overlook. But I think to the composition of the book that I just finished, and for some reason I was just reading Philip Roth because I felt like I had this gap in my reading. I have so many gaps, but I get guilty.
Me too.
I feel guilty because I'm like, oh my God, I've never read Philip Roth. And then I went through this phase where that was like kind of all I was reading, and it helped me. I think it just helped me at the level of, okay, so this is somebody who's considered really skilled at narrative, at like putting a narrative together, and strong mind, strong voice on the page. I don't know what it was. It was kind of unexpected, but I don't want to say that I tried to write a Philip Roth novel, but I do feel like sometimes even focusing on one or a small set of writers or influences can help you, or it can help me, like voice my own projects. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think, so I've just been working on a novel starting, I hope to dedicate the majority of next year to actually writing it and finishing it. But one of the things that I've been doing is like I have a stack of books that are books that I kind of partially want, like spiritually want to influence it. And so what I've been doing is just like picking one of those books, reading a page at random before I write, not necessarily copying anything from those books, but just kind of getting an energy, a tone, a spirit, something like that from it, and hoping that some of that stuff will work its way into what I'm working on. So what I've only read Goodbye Columbus. What was your favorite Philip Roth thing?
I'm trying to think. I read American Pastoral. That was really strong. I think that The Human Stain is really strong, and I think that maybe Sabbath's Theater.
Yeah, I heard that one's like the really like wild one, right?
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. I mean, that's a really crazy book, and I found it like it was one of those books that I think after I finished it, my opinion of it improved with time, the more that I thought about it. But those are probably the three that I found most impressive. And I think, too, there was something inspiring and interesting to me about the fact that he wrote all of these books after having this like major heart surgery. And like,
oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had like a big health scare, kind of near death. It was definitely one of those sort of perspective-giving health experiences. And then he had this enormously creative writing period in his like late middle age and into his like senior years, which is unusual. So I think there's a part of me that's like, how do I stay sharp like that when I'm in my 60s?
Right.
Like, I don't want to be one of these people who gets like old and tired and repetitive, or So I don't know. I'm always looking to people who, like David Lynch is sort of that way too. There are a lot of examples you could point to, but it's like, how do you continue to be creatively generative and open well into your older age?
I remember reading an interview with Philip Roth a few years ago where they asked him, like, what are you reading nowadays? And he said, I don't read fiction anymore. It's a total waste of time. Like, I just read history. Like, I regret having spent so many years reading novels. It's like I forgot all of them. I should have just learned about the world that I actually lived in, which I found a part of me didn't know how like tongue-in-cheek that was, because obviously this guy's dedicated his life to writing fiction. But I found it interesting in terms of, yeah, like if you do dedicate your life to a medium, is there ever a time when you just kind of say like, all right, I'm done. I don't know.
Well, I would just say, it's interesting. I mean, I might have read the same interview. I know that this is the case. He read a ton of really like robust histories, and if you've read American Pastoral and The Human Stain and even Sabbath Theater, I'm trying to think of the other later books, but if you've read those, that they have kind of a historical overlay or
Right.
infrastructure. And I think what might have happened is that he like really found his legs creatively once he started to write against American history.
Mm.
And that was just that was what lit him up. And I think that's what he was doing. And so I don't know, it makes sense to me that he would be like, why haven't I been doing this my whole career?
It's funny. I've always been interested in writers who do like a ton of historical research before they write a novel or whatever they're writing, because it's totally the opposite of how I would ever approach something. So there's a writer, Cesar Aira, Argentine writer who I really love, and I think he kind of I don't know, he has the same sort of thing in terms of how I approach fiction, where somebody was writing a book and he set them in the mountains of some part of Ukraine, and the editor was like, there are no mountains there. And he said, who cares? It's like fiction. It doesn't matter. But I also find it sort of similarly interesting when somebody is like, all right, I got to read like 20 books of history so that I know like the right way that this Roman soldier would tie the shoes on his feet, even though obviously like no reader would actually care about that, but that for some reason the writer needs that like assurance that they're doing the past, some justice.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that. I think it's also maybe giving something. It gives context for your characters, for your fiction. Like you can. It helps you. Maybe it's like a almost like a laxative or like a point. It's like a point of access.
Right.
Maybe it helps just get the creative wheels turning to like start to immerse yourself in the nonfiction-y aspects of it. But I guess whatever works, right? And I think too that there can be, especially if you're writing like really straight historical fiction, something lovely about having a framework for your story built in,
Yeah, and I feel like you can sort of feel the like authority emanating from the writer, right? When they have those details straight, and it definitely has an effect on you as you read it. I wanted to ask you. So you said you just finished a book. Is this a novel?
Yeah, it's a novel, and it's called.
How do you feel about it?
It depends on the hour. I mean, I think in general I feel really good about it. I'll tell you this. I don't feel like I'm ever going to have to rewrite it, which is the first time I've ever felt that.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I've tried to write this book like multiple times, and there have been, it's been a huge headache for like a decade, basically. So,
oh wow.
This time I feel like, well, this is it. I did it, and I can't do this story any better. So,
what's it called?
Be brief and tell them everything.
Oh, nice.
So, we'll see.
I look forward to reading it.
Yeah, it's out on submission, and we'll see what happens with it. But I feel kind of like relieved to have it out of me.
Right.
It's like one of those things. But I'm curious to know about your background. You seem
Sure.
to me like a real like genuine book person. Just in talking to you briefly here, I feel like you're somebody who like from the cradle like loved books. Is this the case, or is it one of these things you came to in adolescence or college?
Yeah, actually, I would definitely say your characterization of me is true. It's like one of the main things I do. I mean, especially now that I can't really hang out with friends or go out, like this summer I wasn't working and I just read most of the day. But I didn't always have this relationship to reading. When I was a kid, I hated it. Mostly because of, I don't know if they do this in California, but in New York State, summer reading was required. So, if you were going from the third grade to the fourth grade, you had to read these like 5 different books, and you'd be tested on it the first week back. And I just resented it so much because it's like summer is this, this time finally I can just do whatever I want, play video games, hang out with people, skateboard, whatever. And I always had these like books hanging over my head, and it's like, I just didn't, I didn't really, it wasn't ever anything that I wanted to do, outside of school. And I think though that, by the time I was in middle school and high school, it was just one of those subjects I was decent at, I would get assigned books and I would reasonably enjoy them and be able to write about them okay. But I would say, it wasn't until college where I became really obsessed. And I would say in particular, it was when I read Frank O'Hara for the first time and when I read Roberto Bolaño. I went from reading 10 books a year to reading 80 books a year, I guess for the last at least 12 years of my life, it's been one of the major things, that I do.
What was it about O'Hara and Bolaño that struck you so much?
I guess for O'Hara, before reading him, my relationship to poetry was, I just sort of saw it as this kind of this relic, right? Like this embalmed thing that people in the past did that had, you studied it out of historical curiosity, but it had no relationship to your life, and then I guess when I first read O'Hara, all of his poems seemed so full of joy and casualness, I guess. It made me feel like, wow, this is something that I can actually hold and feel like there's something there for me. And with Bolaño, it's funny. I've said before, to friends and stuff, that it's probably the book that made me start writing 2666. And I kind of read it serendipitously. I was in my friend's dorm room in college, and it had just come out in English. And it's this huge, 900-page book. And I just looked at these blurbs that were really emphatic. And I said, all right, I'm going to read this book, just kind of out of nowhere. And I don't know, it was such an intense reading experience. I remember when I was in the last part of the book, I had maybe 60 pages left, and it was 2 a.m. and I just stayed up till 5 in the morning when I finished it. And there was something it made me feel like literature could be this collage of all of these worlds, of all of these different times and interests and commitments and affects, and it could be kind of messy too, right? It could just be this this collage, yeah. And so I think that really excited me and kind of made me want to try writing for myself.
Where'd you go to college?
I actually went to Manhattan College, where I'm currently teaching, which is pretty surreal. I remember I started teaching there 2 years ago, and the first class I taught was where I took freshman bio in 2007, which was kind of strange. But I used to in Philly. I used to teach at Temple, UPenn, a few other schools.
And you grew up, you said, in Mount Vernon, north of the Bronx. Yeah.
Well, so I was born in Caracas, Venezuela. My mother was American. My father is Venezuelan. And I was born and raised there until I was 8. And then I moved with my mother to Mount Vernon, which is where she grew up. And I've lived in Mount Vernon, not including when I lived in Philadelphia, ever since then.
So did your parents split up?
Yeah, they just got separated at first, and then they finally got a divorce years later. But they both said that getting separated was the best thing they had ever done for their relationship. They became significantly more amicable to each other afterward.
Well, that can happen sometimes. I've heard people say that before, especially co-parenting. You get to have the kid and then pass the kid back, to the other parent and have a break and give yourself some time to breathe. I've heard people talk maybe half jokingly about that, but there's probably more than a grain of truth to it.
Yeah, I mean, in my parents' case, I think it was just a kind of profound mismatch of personality. My mother was a very anxious, on top of everything type of person. Whereas my dad is a bit more kind of like laissez-faire or whatever. We'll figure it out when the time comes type of thing. And it just kind of, they really clashed when it came to like paying bills and that kind of thing.
So you grew up the first 8 years in Caracas, and then your parents split or separate, and you moved country.
Yeah.
So you had not really lived in the United States until then. That had to be a big change.
Yeah, I mean, I had visited for like Christmas before then, but it was the first few months I remember pretty distinctly were strange. I mean, my mother's family was here, so I had a kind of grandparents and aunts and that kind of thing. But obviously, yeah, no friends at first, and I was put in like the ESL class, and I kind of quickly graduated out of it, I guess, because I was more or less raised bilingual. It's funny, and now I speak English like way better than I speak Spanish, but so yeah, that transition was rough, but after a few months, I made some friends, and it was okay.
Yeah, kids adjust. Like,
yeah,
we had somebody living with us. My son has an aide. He's got some disabilities, and she actually moved in with us during COVID.
Oh, wow.
And then she decided to move to Canada and left us a few days ago after living with us for 6 months and working with us for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And I was like dreading it. I was like, this is my son's best friend, and we're losing her. And I was really depressed about it. And I got choked up and, all these things. And
right.
He's fine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He's doing okay.
They miss her. My kids miss her, but it's my wife and I are having the hard time. We're like, it's just funny that children, are the ones who can handle shit, and it's adults who have the problems.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. I mean, I guess maybe I'm just thinking about my experience back then. Maybe it's like an attention span thing. Maybe it's like, well, things are different now. You just got to find some other thing to occupy your time and give you satisfaction. Even if you don't conceptualize it like that at that age. But yeah, maybe kids have a easier time letting go.
Do you have any siblings?
No, I'm an only child.
Oh, okay. And when you moved with your mom to New York, your dad stayed behind in Venezuela?
Yeah, he still lives there.
Okay, but you got to see him regularly?
Yeah, I mean, so I would visit Venezuela every summer until I was about like 13 or 14. I haven't been back there since then. And my dad would come to visit, but I haven't seen him in 11 years actually, because I still talk to him. We're on great terms. I love him very much, but he can't enter the country. He was denied a visa once, and then he messed up some paperwork, and then he was entering the United States again, and they detained him, and they kept him in a room for like 36 hours and basically said that he's denied entry to the United States. And so this was a number of years ago, so there's a possibility that it's expired and he could try again. But yeah, I haven't. The plan is to, once COVID is over, or whatever over means, to meet up in Europe. My uncle, his brother lives in Spain, and so have a little family reunion when the time comes.
Damn. So just because he's messed up some paperwork, like honest mistake, they detain him and he can't come into the United States?
Well, because what happened is he got Italian citizenship through his grandfather on his father's side, and he was denied a visa as a Venezuelan, and then on some paperwork or something was asked if he's ever been denied a visa, and he thought it was in relation to his now new Italian passport, and so he said no. And when he got off the plane, there was literally like 3 guys there waiting for him, and say like, "Why did you lie to us?" And he said it was like a literally like good cop bad cop routine, where like one guy would come into the room, yell at him for like 10 minutes, he would leave, then another person would be like, "Oh, like you really shouldn't lie to us," blah blah blah. But yeah, he said the experience was terrible.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so you grow up north of the city. Did you go into New York? Like when you live in Mount Vernon, is your mom taking you into the city to museums and stuff? Did you have that kind of like childhood experience of Manhattan?
Yeah, she worked in Manhattan at a dance company. Both of my parents were dancers, and she commuted every day to the Upper West Side. And it's funny when you're a kid. Like I'm thinking about like when I was in elementary school. I wasn't interested. I just wanted to like hang out with my friends and play video games or whatever. I think when I was a teenager and had a growing interest in art and going to like see bands and stuff like that, I started going to the city a lot more.
Wait, so both your parents are dancers?
Yeah, they were. That's how they met. They're both ballet dancers. And my dad kind of switched to doing like contemporary dance. And once my mom retired, she became like the rehearsal director for a dance company.
Okay, I can't really see you. You got a coat on, but I'm like, are you a dancer? Do you have any dancing genes?
No, I mean I like dancing, like just like for fun, but not. I don't think I have the capacity for it. Yeah, I mean it's funny. When I was a kid, I would go to see my mom's performances, my dance performances, and I remember being completely bored by it, but I loved the music. Like a lot of the times I would just kind of close my eyes and just listen to the music. And music was really my first, love before writing. Like I really got into playing music and listening to it when I was a young teenager. And so if there was any effect it had on me, I think it was that. It was musical.
Didn't I use some of your music on this show for a while?
Yeah, I remember because like years ago you asked for interstitial music, and so I sent you like instrumental versions of music I had recorded, and I didn't know if you ever did anything with it, and I was listening to the episode where you interview Joey Grantham, and at the end of it I like hear my own music. I was like, whoa.
You have a Joey Grantham aesthetic. You have like the same kind of like incredible head of hair and the mustache and the glasses.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, so it's funny. I just did a reading for the book Not I, and asked a bunch of people to read along with me. And I realized out of the 6 readers, 3 of them were guys with mustaches, which is not planned.
Is this a thing, do you think? Like I feel like young male writers with good hair might be growing mustaches and wearing glasses as a kind of branding exercise?
It's entirely possible. I'm not sure.
So I was going to say, like, you said you were bored by ballet as a kid. That's not something I ever have gotten into or understand, but I do appreciate the physical skill required, like the strength and hard work that these professional ballet dancers have to have, or have to put into it. Like it's intense.
It's so physically, physically, psychologically, and artistically demanding. My mom would tell me, story, because she went to like a ballet high school in New York, and as soon as she was 18, she joined a ballet company, and so she did it her whole life, and. Especially back then, they had incredibly, ethically problematic and cruel practices. Like they would make the ballerinas like weigh in at the end of the week, and like if you were even a pound heavier, they would deduct money from your paycheck. Stuff that would be totally illegal today. But also just things like one night she had a fall on stage, and she went to the doctor, and she was pretty sure she had broken her foot. And the doctor said, when did you break your foot the first time? And she said, like, what are you talking about? And she had already broken her foot, but because they're trained to sort of persevere, she just went on with it. It never went to the doctor, never, thought about it twice. So, yeah, really, really brutal.
Okay, see, I think that's kind of what I like about it, or am fascinated. That's what I find fascinating is how when you say ballet, I think a lot of people reflexively think like, oh, that's kind of this like frou-frou, like feet, but it's actually like savage.
Totally. I mean, you have to pick up a person like entirely above your head and like make it look good, you know?
And like physically, so you like your parents must be like ripped. This is the other thing, like the other kind of shallow appreciation I have for it. I'm always like, man, I wish I had like a ballet, like these male ballerinas. I'm like, they're so fit, you know, so I can feel like a sense of envy. Was your dad like ripped growing up?
Yeah, it's funny. Anytime I see a picture of my parents when they're like, my dad was like in his late 20s, my mom was in her early 30s. And it's like, Jesus Christ, they look like models, you know, like they're an incredible, I mean, yeah, their profession is to exercise essentially. Yeah.
But you never got into it.
No. Yeah. I mean, I like dancing. I love music. But not in any formal capacity, no.
And you play music.
Yeah. I've been playing guitar since I was 13.
You still do it?
Yeah. I mean, not as much in the last few years. It's one of those things where maybe this is just like I mean, I'm only 32, but it's one of those things like getting older where things that used to be very exciting to you, like you can acknowledge that they're interesting still, but you just don't feel that thing in your heart. And so a lot of guitar-based music, I just kind of lately have been a little ambivalent about it. And so I've been trying to teach myself the piano, which has been really difficult. But yeah, I still tinker with the guitar, definitely.
Can you sing?
I've tried, but I'm not very good at it. I think the last thing I recorded just like 5 years ago, I had to use auto-tune just because I couldn't, you know, I would hit the notes right half of the time and the other half I didn't. I actually maybe 3 years ago or so, I took vocal lessons for about a month with an opera singer, not to sing opera, but just to work on my chops. And yeah, it's really challenging. It really comes from like your body. It doesn't really come from your throat. And I stopped because I never practiced. I lived with roommates at the time, and like it's kind of to hear some guy going like la 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 la, and the next room over is not. It wasn't something I wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not something that I normally consider, this idea that you can train to be a better singer. I always feel like it's something you're born with, which I guess to some extent is true. But a guy like me, like I'm not totally tone deaf, but I'm not a good singer. And
yeah, I would say I'm in the same place, totally.
Yeah, I feel like somebody like me, if I took voice lessons consistently for a period of years, I could probably get considerably better.
Totally. I think the big hurdle for me was, when you play an instrument, like you can physically see the note, right? Like you can see, okay, this is a G, or whatever. Whereas it's totally, you are the note. It's totally hidden from you. You can't really. You're just gonna have to hope and pray, or I guess get good enough eventually where you just know, you can sing that G or whatever note you're trying to sing.
Be so great to be like musically gifted and to be like just a god.
I mean, I always feel jealous of, like, as you describe, people who just are so good at singing naturally. It's like that one thing I wish I was born with.
I probably agree. I just think, but I also think there's something, or there can often be something ridiculous about people doing rock music past a certain age. And I don't want to be ageist. I'm not trying to be, ridiculous about it, but it's just something that feels very much of a piece with youth. And there are, I think, rock musicians who do age well. I think a lot about like aging and the arts in general. Like, how do you do it in a way that's like graceful and interesting, and how do you remain vital? But there can be something a little ridiculous to me about seeing like a 65-year-old man in leather pants, like dancing around.
Right. Well, I guess, because it's like the thing that I love about that music is that it's really silly, right? It's like, it's supposed to be juvenile. It's like, it's filled with this passion, this vitriol, but it's sha-la-la, I love you. Like that's the depth of most of it. And I don't mean that in a critical way. That's what I love about it, that it's like, it's this shallow depth that's amazing to be inside of. And so it is funny when it's like a grown ass adult like singing that kind of thing. But at the same time, it's like there's examples that band Guided by Voices. They're all older guys, and I love that band. They still sound great and they make great music. But yeah, I feel like maybe there are more staid arts like like literature and film where it's more common to see somebody continuing to work for decades.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of it's about intake. I think you have to keep, like if you're a musician, you have to keep wide open and keep listening to what's new and keep listening to what you love and finding new things and staying curious. And I think the same is true for any art, really. Like if you close yourself off or decide that you're over it, you can wither on the vine. I think in order to stay vital, you have to ingest.
Yeah, I what you're saying reminds me of I read this like years ago, and like it was like Rolling Stone or something. This must have been like 2003 or 2004. When I used to subscribe to the magazine, I was reading an interview with the guitarist from AC/DC, and the interviewer was like, "So, do you like any new acts today?" And he said, like, I haven't listened to a new song since 1970.
And you haven't made it an interesting song since 1980.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's funny in his case because it's like, all of their songs have a really similar quality and have had that quality since 1980. But yeah, and on the other end of the spectrum, there's someone like Dennis Cooper, who I mentioned before. I don't know if you ever looked at his blog.
Yeah,
he's constantly reading new stuff. It's really impressive, his dedication to being like tapped into the world of literature and what people are doing.
But I think more specifically what people are doing at this like edge. He seems to be like the leading edge or the outer edge or however you want to characterize it. I feel like he very much lives in that experimental space and keeps himself tuned into it and open to it and champions it. Yeah,
and I feel like that's what keeps his work. So I think he has a new novel coming out, which I'm really looking forward to. But even his last one, it still feels like so unique and fresh, and all of his books, from the 80s to now, all felt like really vital to me.
And he's one of your faves? Like what? Like who?
Yeah, I haven't read him in a long time, but there was a period where I was just like obsessed, and I read everything he wrote.
Who are some others? I mean, you said Bolaño, you said O'Hara. Like, give me some other writers who've had a big impact on you.
All right, let me think. I should have prepared for this question because I'm probably going to forget everything. So I would say I love a lot of poetry. John Ashbery, Alice Notley. In terms of contemporary writers, I really love the work of Jesse Ball. I don't know if you've ever read him. There's something kind of anachronistic in his work. It reads like, in a good way, like something you would read in the 19th century, but has this really kind of strange quality. Trying to think of. I mean, there's like I read so much, and it's like there's so many books that I like, but I'm totally blanking now. I guess I'll stop it there. I can't think of anybody else.
And how have you? I'm curious to know when I talk to anybody these days how they have weathered the past year, or whatever it is, 9 months of COVID and quarantine. You mentioned that you've been teaching in this beautifully arranged room that you're in right now, this very orderly, pristine, room. But has it changed your writing habits, reading habits? Have you found yourself depressed or sluggish, or have you found it actually sort of nice because it limits your options?
I think all of that. When it first started, I was kind of fine with it. I mean, obviously it was really scary and depressing that I couldn't see my friends. I missed them. But in terms of like my daily habits, I especially this summer, it's like every day I'd wake up, I'd read for a while, I'd exercise, I'd write, go for a walk, It was fine. I think, at some point, there was a bit of a breaking point where I just sort of felt like I was living in like a dream or something. And today's weather has made me think about how it's really kind of cold, rainy, overcast. How the winter is probably going to be rough, right? At least in the summer, it's like I could walk around outside and enjoy the weather. But I guess, yeah, we'll see. I've been doing okay. Teaching online has been a little awkward. It's really not ideal, but it's better than anything, or than not doing it, obviously.
Yeah, I feel like the winter is going to be a big test. I don't think it's going to go well.
But you're in LA, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think here it's obviously easier because you can still get outside. I'm thinking of people who have to be in indoor environments, and like what's going to happen to the to the contagiousness or the volume of infected people. But did you ever get it? I know New York, the area, like was kind of the hardest hit early on. Like a lot of people got it and had it and were through it before they even realized they had it.
Yeah, no, I was extremely careful because I'm immunocompromised, and so I would go out maybe like once a week to get groceries, but other than that, I just didn't leave, or I would take a walk around my block, but always with a mask and whatever else. So I got lucky, I never got it, but I know plenty of people who have had it, some pretty badly. Thankfully, no one has died, but others, they just sort of couldn't taste anything for 2 weeks. So real kind of crazy spectrum.
What, you got asthma or something?
No, I got Crohn's, and so I take an immunosuppressant to handle the Crohn's, and so the medicine makes me immunocompromised. Got it. Which is
And you talk about your how big of a reader you are. You're reading like 80 books a year. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I write them down. Some years less than others. Like 1 year, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I was teaching so much, and I think I read like 50 books or something. But last year, I finally, I've always wanted to read 100 books in a year, and I finally did it. I kind of cheated though, because it was like December 20th, and I had maybe 5 books to go. So I was like, let me read these 5 poetry collections.
I was going to say, how many of these are poetry collections? You read them in a day.
Most of them I would say are fiction. Like, 60% fiction, 30% poetry, and then like philosophy or politics, history, that kind of thing.
Do you have an idea for what kind of career you want to have? Do you have a vision for such a thing, or is it kind of you make it up on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to write the books that excite me, and hopefully find somebody to publish them. I don't really have any grand aspirations, but I mean, I think that's enough, right? Because I was thinking about, I forget who I was talking to about this, but there's like this idea that you should try to write that novel that has, like, even if you're an experimental writer, try to have that novel that has like some kind of commercial appeal, so that you could sell it to Vintage or whomever, and then it doesn't sell at all, and then nobody wants to publish your stuff again, so you're back to where you started. So I don't know, it's like one of those things that like I not overthinking it, just taking it project at a time.
Yeah, it's so tricky. I've been thinking about this because I've got this book out on submission, and it's like, well, what is marketable or saleable? And these people who, I guess there are some people who write just commercial fiction. They write stories and, genre usually, and it's very clear. It's like a mystery, or it's a murder story, or true crime, or horror, or whatever it is. But I feel like in literary fiction, it's just so hard to game it out. Like certain books will become runaway bestsellers, and you're like, really? Like, I don't know how you could possibly predict it. And I guess I wonder at the people. I wonder sometimes about writers who seem to have an instinct or something, for writing stories that resonate in a literary fiction sense. And then I also, in the modern context, will sometimes think like, well, maybe they have like a big social media following, and I'm like, is that what's driving this? Like, not only in terms of book sales, but also in terms of like, is that what publishers are looking at these days? They just want you to have like a Twitter following or something.
Yeah, I guess because you do the PR work like for them to some degree. But yeah, I've thought about that too. I don't know. Have you read any of the Sally Rooney books?
No, I mean a little bit of was it Normal People?
Yeah,
I think
I like both of them a lot. I think she's a great writer, but she's younger than me. I think she's like 29. Yeah, so it's like funny to think about like how did that happen? How did I mean, I think her novels deserve that recognition because or at least I like them a lot. But it's interesting to think like that she's writing in a certain genre of literary fiction, and I've seen that kind of writing elsewhere, and I've seen that writing also just not have really nearly as much popularity. So it does seem like maybe like right place, right time type of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's actually like closer to the point that I was trying to make too, is that like there can be books that are very similar, not necessarily in a one-for-one way, but they're working in the same space,
right,
with what to you might feel like a similar level of what quality. The writing is really good in both cases, but one of the books will be resonating with a huge readership and the other one not so much. And I think doing this show has brought that home to me over and over again, that you can be talking to a writer who is ridiculously gifted and has written a terrific book, and they'll be lucky to find 5,000 readers.
Right.
And then you could be talking to somebody who's gifted and has written a very similar book or a book that works in the same area, and 1 million people go crazy over it. And I guess the big question is like, why? Like, what is it that makes the difference? Is it a PR thing? Is it a social media thing? Is it something buried in the text somehow, some energy? I don't know what it is. I don't think anybody does.
Yeah, I think some of it has to be marketing, right? Like, I recently read a book. So here's another writer who I like a lot. It was called Thanks by Pablo Cachadian. He's from Argentina. Totally like bonkers, batshit crazy, surreal novel. Like amazing. I thought it was incredible. And the publisher just like didn't. I mean, literature and translation already has such a small market, but the publisher just didn't do any marketing, and so it's like I haven't seen anybody. The only reason I read it is because a friend of mine who really likes him recommended it. But otherwise, like and then you have someone like like Bolaño, who we mentioned earlier. He like blew up after he died, but it's like how does how does that market work? I don't know.
How did Bolaño become such a big deal after he died? I'm wondering what it was. Is there anything we can point to?
I think there's like the sort of traditional like romance of the artist who's gone, who I think his last book he like famously was sort of like writing against the clock. Like he knew he was going to die, or at least thought that the chances of survival were slim. And yeah, I think that that was part of it. I also feel like, especially in English language literature, it's like every few years they pick some Spanish language writer who is like representative of everything, and like that's what happens with. I think that's what happened with Bolaño. And some people would say like, oh, his writing was magical realist, and it's like I don't think so at all. But it's because maybe a lot of English language readers don't have a point of contact other than Garcia Marquez or whomever. It does make it seem like there's just like some board of directors. They're like, okay, now it's this writer's turn to be the people that people read, or the book that people read.
Well, I know, that's really true, and I feel like there are other contexts in the culture where you could say similar things. It almost feels like there's only like there's a finite amount of space for certain cultural roles. Like, for example, leading man. Like how many leading men, like major leading men actors, can the culture hold at any given time? I mean, like I'm totally just theorizing here, but it just doesn't. It doesn't feel like it's infinite. It feels like there can only be like 12 of them or something.
Yeah. I mean, because the supply of like super hot, like jacked guys is is a lot in the world, but we can only have 6 of them be famous at a time.
Yeah, and so it's like for the major like Latino like writer, like the voice of like
right.
Latino literature, especially in America, which is so like ethnocentric and everything, probably like only can handle like somehow mentally like one at a time or something. But it's ridiculous.
Well, one thing that I appreciated, I felt like after he got big, it sort of created I don't know, like there was all of a sudden a lot more writers from Spanish being translated into English, and really good writers like Alejandro Zambra is a favorite of mine. And yeah, I feel like maybe there was a push like, oh, there are people who are interested in this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things I scold myself for, and I always enjoy it whenever I do it, is reading outside of my country. And it sounds like you do a pretty good job of this. You read a lot of books in translation or a lot of books from, foreign writers.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that the majority of what you read?
I would say, yeah. I mean, maybe like at least in terms of fiction, at least 50% of it. Yeah, like my favorite presses are like places like New Directions, Dalkey Archive. Yeah, places that put out a lot of translation. I mean, there's just so much amazing work, you know. I remember when I was in an MFA program, I had like a class meeting, and one of the teachers said like I should push myself to read more work that is written in English in order to like have a sense for the sentence. And yeah, it just struck me as kind of strange to like assume that all the best literature is the one that happened to be written in your native language, you know.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, I mean, you tell me, you've read more, international fiction or whatever, international literature than I probably have over the past several years. But, like, what does it teach you, or what have you learned about American literature, or how you want to approach literature from reading other cultures? Like, and what are they doing? Or can you point to things that are happening and say, Argentinian or South American literature or European literature or Spanish literature, whatever it is, like, can you locate like artistic movements or, I don't know, tendencies that you see in these books that you find lacking in American literature or would like to incorporate into your own literary project?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is that it shows you that and here I'm talking about the kind of generic American literary fiction, right? Like like New Yorker style Iowa fiction, MFA, which I know is an unfair characterization, but the concerns of that style of writing, that it's like this obsession with craft, with this obsession, it's like this beautifully written story about like a guy who's divorced, who goes on a cruise for a weekend or whatever. And there's this kind of, this kind of unquestioned, like middle class lyricism to it, that maybe it's not so much the case anymore, but for at least I feel a long time was sort of exalted as a platonic ideal of literary fiction. When you read stuff outside of the U.S., I guess you see like those concerns just like don't exist. And instead, there's a lot more playfulness. I mean, you can't generalize, but there's you read sentences that you think you wouldn't read from a traditional American literary fiction writer. You also see a lot more sort of play and freedom. And I'm talking here about all the authors that I was just mentioning, like Cesar Aira, Alejandro Zambra. There's just like a playfulness and an openness to what literature can do that I personally just really appreciate. It feels so much more freeing.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like, oh, I'm not bound to New Yorker style fiction. Like, you can do other things here. But I think maybe there are people out there who are thinking, like, how do I get published if I'm working too avant-garde? Mm-hmm. How am I going to find readers? I guess that has to be of lesser importance. There might not be, but the thing is, there's always an exception to these quote unquote rules. But it's like, the literary fiction market is so small, it seems, to begin with, or it's like there's a million people fighting over one relatively small pie, and then you start to get into avant-garde modes, and I think you do have to be willing to accept that there's going to be kind of like a micro audience.
Well, it's funny. Earlier you said like, a writer might only have 5,000 readers, and I was like, whoa, that's like
that's crazy.
Beyond what
Yeah. But I'm thinking of something in a more traditional mode.
Right, of course. Yeah,
like a really, I don't know. I can go back through the list of interviews I've done where I've talked to somebody and just been like, this person deserves. I think that's kind of the motivation for this entire project, and maybe like most of my, or a large part of my professional life, is just this, like, I get very confused over why writers aren't celebrated more. It just bums me out. It's like, these are, to me, they're like major artists, and to the culture, they're like afterthoughts.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned why you started this. I've been listening to this podcast since the beginning. I think is it Blake Butler was like the first guest?
One of them.
Yeah. And so it's funny to hear you talk about it, because that's the reason why I remember liking the podcast, because it felt like it was situated in that space, like giving these writers who might not have a gigantic following the room to talk about why it is they do what they want to do. I think Blake Butler is a great example of someone who, he writes really challenging, really beautiful novels, but seems to, have a following, have success.
Yeah, no, he's working in, like, he's kind of been able to cross over into mainstream publishing, mainstream. He's found a way to get published by a big press in New York, but he's working in the avant-garde, I guess you could say, or that might be, kind of a more experimental mode. It's a hard place to succeed, getting somebody to kind of back you, but he's really, really gifted.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I guess like a place to leave it is like, you said you're working on a novel that you want to finish next year. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I'm about like 90% done with a short story collection. These are short stories that I've written, over the past like 5 years or so. And I feel like a lot of them work well together. So, hopefully before the end of this year, I want to finish that. And then, next year I want to work on a novel. It'll be my third novel attempt. It's quite difficult, I've found.
Is the story collection flash fiction, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's like there's some stories that are maybe in like the 3,000 word range, but there are a ton that are like a paragraph long, 2 paragraphs. And
then the novel is what? Can you describe it? Give us.
I think it's too early, but it's I'm still interested in working in a kind of fragmentary mode, but kind of putting that together in the space of a book. So that's where I'm at with it right now.
All right. That's kind of cryptic. That's kind of mysterious.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to talk with you. I didn't realize you'd been listening to this show for that long.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And congratulations on the new book. Best of luck on the story collection and this mysterious novel that you're working on.
Thanks a lot.
All right. There you go, folks. That is Sebastian Castillo. His new book is called Not I. It is available from Word West Press. You can follow Sebastian on Twitter. His handle is @BartlebyTaco. @BartlebyTaco. Sebastian Castillo. The book, one more time, is called Not I. Go get your copy immediately. This program is offered freely. Every single episode of the Otherppl podcast, almost 700 episodes. Come on. They're all available for free. It's a listener-supported show. If you listen regularly and you have the means, throw a couple of bucks in the hat. You can do that at patreon.com/otherpplpod. Patreon.com/otherpplpod. If you have something to say to me, if you want to send in a photo of where you listen and participate in that whole thing, listeners do that. They send me photos of where they are in space when they're listening. Are you in your car? Are you in a field? Are you in a forest? Are you under a table? Where are you? Take a photo. You can email me. My address is letters@otherppl.com. You can also get Otherppl gear. Do you want a t-shirt? Do you want a sweatshirt? Do you want a tank top? Just go to the Otherppl website, otherppl.com. Click on the t-shirt in the left sidebar. Get some apparel. It's very fashionable. This program has its own official app, the Otherppl with Brad Listi app. It's available wherever apps are available. It, too, is free. It's a free app. It's a good app. Get the app. I've got Andrew Weatherhead in the pipeline. He's coming up soon. I don't know if I'm going to do a post-mortem on the election. I did one in 2016. Maybe I will. I'll see how the mood strikes me if I'm up for that. Maybe Sunday. I don't know. I got to see how this goes. I feel good, but I could feel bad. I could feel very bad, or I could feel very good. Nobody knows. I don't know. You know, maybe. By the time you're listening to this, you could know. Right now, I don't know. You're catching me in this moment of limbo. America hanging in the balance. Existential election 2020. He's totally got this, dude.